My name is Ron Dagdag. I am a Microsoft MVP. Just recently got awarded Mixed Reality, Internet of Things, and AI. And I've been a Microsoft MVP for 7 years now. I also just started a new job at 7-Eleven. I'm a software engineering manager at 7-Eleven Corporate in Irving. All right, let's get started. All right, who among here are mixed reality devs that have played with mixed reality in the past? A few people. Virtual reality, have actually played virtual reality games? Okay, good, good. Actually, there's a lot of VR gaming places now here in Dallas. I don't know if you've noticed, but there is a company that you can actually not just rent out, but as a social VR. That is a good experience. Anyone have experience or augmented reality developers? No? Okay, we got one person. Any JavaScript developers? All right. Hopefully, we got more people that would raise their hand. Okay, good. And in between that, I will be talking about this magic cube. Most likely, everyone is familiar with Rubik's Cube, but it was originally called a magic cube. Anyone played it? Good at it? All right. All right, so our agenda today, we will be talking about mixed reality and what is WebXR, and I will talk a little bit about different virtual reality experiences, and then augmented reality experience, and what are the open source JavaScript libraries available for you to get started. Good? And in between, this is a meetup. Raise your hand if you have questions. Feel free to ask. I enjoy the interaction. Yes. I will put a little bit of trivia about these magic cubes. All right. And if you want a copy of my presentation or the GitHub link, I have that with me, and I will also show this later on. All right, mixed reality. Mixed reality is a blend of physical and digital world, and it unlocks natural and intuitive 3D. All this is possible, because there's human, and then there's computers, and then the environment around it, right? So human and computer, typically we call that human-computer interaction. A lot of UI, UX relates to that, right? And then, of course, human and environment is typically conventional reality, which is all we all live in today, and you are here today with me, right? So we live in conventional reality. And then, of course, with computers and robotics, with it engaging with its environment, that's called perception, right? In computer vision. So all this is possible, and that's what we call mixed reality, is the overlapping between all three human, computer, and environment. So mixed reality is possible because of the advancement in computer vision and graphical processing. Not just that, AI, display technologies, input systems, and cloud computing. One of the main things is the environmental understanding. A lot when we call within computer vision, we call that spatial mapping or anchor. A lot of being able to understand, robots being able to understand where they are, where they're located, how is it seen around it. Those self-driving cars are possible because of environmental understanding. And then another one is human understanding. There's hand tracking now, eye tracking. A lot of the VR devices have hand tracking and eye tracking that is incorporated. Those are sensors that is incorporated into, and not just that. You have Alexa devices and Google devices, speech input. Any computer now has a speech input, your phones, everywhere else. So that's part of the human understanding side. And then there's spatial sound. Spatial sound allows you, if you played video games, you feel the sound, right? Or go to a movie theater these days. Spatial sound is a very important part of the experience, and that's the reason why we go to movie theaters, unless we have one of those, very, very nice setup at our home. But movie theaters, 3D glasses, and the sound makes it believable, right? And get that experience. And then, of course, location and positioning, right? Not just in physical, but also virtual spaces, being able to experience it and have a depth of space between you when you're talking to someone in VR. And then not just that, but because there's a lot of tools right now to build 3D assets, and not just in the traditional way. Now it's AI is helping us build not just 2D assets, pictures, but also starting to get into building these 3D assets. So a lot of those is contributing to the advancement into mixed reality. Mixed reality, it is a spectrum. Of course, on the left side, reality. And a lot of us here are already familiar with reality. We live there every day. And then on the other side is virtuality. Computer games, virtual games, and not just VR games. They're all in virtual world, right? And then in between, you have augmented reality and augmented virtuality. Augmented reality, you have, like on that picture, you have the image of the background, and then you impose and bring 3D assets into that space. Augmented virtuality is the other way around, where you have 3D or virtual backgrounds, and you're bringing in, like in this case, animals, or in this case, some virtual assets into that, or reality world information into virtual. So that is the spectrum. And then there are different types of, any questions so far before I move on to the next one? You good? Yes? All right, there are different types of virtual reality experiences. One of them is non-immersive VR. Who among here have played video games? Most likely you all have played video games. Even kids these days, most likely they're playing in the back. Video games right now, right? And that's where you see the real world and virtual objects at the same time. Right? And then there's the semi-immersive VR, which is where you see a virtual world in connection to the real world. Has anyone looked at 360 virtual tour? YouTube has a bunch of those where you would, you can just open it up, and then you move your mouse and it would pan left and right, and it feels like you're 3D, 360, and it was captured with a specific camera. And then there's the full immersive VR devices, which is, I have one here. I have the Oculus Quest 2. This one right here, it's an Oculus Quest, and it has some of the controllers. So fully immersive, it blocks the real world. You have to wear it in your face, and it would block. You can't see people around you. And that's how you would experience the virtual world. And then there's social VR, which is the collaborative side of things, where you can actually experience in two people wearing this VR headset, or another person is just on their phone, and then you can collaborate and connect, even though you are not in the same room. There's also places where you have your laser tag is being converted into VR experiences now, where you're both in the same room, you have your own weapon, and you go around killing zombies or whatever, right? Yeah. So that is where you experience social VR. Anyone tried that before, or those ones that you can experience together? Another one is, let's go to the augmented reality experiences. Marker-based AR, where we use markers or QR code or images to trigger some virtual content. QR codes pretty much are everywhere, but you can actually use it to load VR content or AR content on top of that. There's also markerless AR. Markerless AR is where it can detect, if you've been to, anyone used one of those IKEA apps or those even Amazon, where you can try, test it in your living room. So you're browsing something and you wanted to see it in your living room, you can actually experience that. That's called markerless AR. And then there's location-based AR, where it uses GPS or CV technologies to display content in a specific location, right? That's when you talk about Pokemon Go and got famous. I don't know who else. Do people still play Pokemon Go? Okay. So, do you still play the AR version of it, or is it more? Yes, yeah. So, but you're still location-based. You can still do location-based AR, but nowadays you just there and you just play with the video game itself. And then there's projection-based AR, where I worked before at Spacey. We were doing projection-based AR, where we would use projector and display the content in real-world surfaces. If you've been to anyone have been to the AT&T Center in downtown Dallas? If you have a chance to go to the AT&T Center and wading through all the homeless people there, and then there's a AT&T Center down in downtown, you can actually experience projection-based AR, where you can control, when you go to this kind of like a small dome, and then you can, do a piece of art with your hand, and then it projects to the screen. So there's a projection-based AR experience there. And then there's the superimposition-based AR, where it would replace virtual objects in real world. This would be useful for, like industrial experiences, where, sometimes you have your iPad and you're looking at the machine, and the machine tells you the stats in AR. So as you go around the factory, you can actually read some, or some people would wear VR glasses, or AR glasses, or HoloLens, and go to the construction site and be able to gain some information about the construction site. What would it look like? Those are some superimposition-based AR. My point here is AR and VR is here. We don't call him AR. We call him something else. We call him Pokemon Go. You get what I'm saying? You call these different experiences. And it started to change its name. It's starting to be part of our everyday life, like the Amazon app, where you can view it into your space. That's pretty much something that's already out there. On the VR side, there's already a lot of use cases on it, especially on the gaming side, especially on some of, being able to, the social VR side. We already know some of the use cases for these. Okay, going back to Rubik's Cube, there's a 43 quintillion possible combinations on Rubik's Cube, and of course, is it one way or few ways to solve it, right? Yeah, so that's the amazing part of this toy, and I think it's one of the toys that survived through time. I think got famous at some point. WebXR. Has anyone heard of WebXR, or okay? WebXR is a unified API for VR and AR devices. That means the VR headsets, the AR glasses, the smartphones with browsers have that, WebXR capabilities. So it's a web platform and ecosystem related to XR. X means mixed reality, right? X, either AR or VR. That's one way to explain that. A good place to start if you want to learn more about WebXR, you go to immersiveweb.dev, and it is also it is not open source, but it is on GitHub. It is open platform, an ecosystem, and it does have iOS support, but it's still experimental. So mostly Android that you would use this. Actually, Chromium, a lot of Chromium devices do have capabilities of WebXR. The Samsung browser has WebXR. There's there's other browsers that is out there that has WebXR integrated in. But on the iOS side, because of Vision OS, we started to incorporate that. There is a special browser, or there's a special app to do WebXR in iOS, but it's another app. It's not the Safari browser. Yes, it is open standard. That's being integrated into. Thank you. That's the right term I'm looking for. Any questions so far? Christine? Yes? So what are the advantages? Why would you do WebXR? One thing is because it's open platform. It's permissionless publishing. That's what's great about the web, right? I mean, you build your website, publish it out there. You didn't have to go to the App Store in order to get it approved. You just have it published. You can publish every hour how much you want to publish, it's fine. Another one is because it's shareable. Whenever you have your link, your website, you can just send the link to someone and they can access it on their machine. Another is accessible for developers. It's a low barrier of entry. A lot of us, when we're starting up as web developers, we didn't have to install as much, right? A lot of the ecosystem is free. We can get started. When I first started, we used to edit in the editor and it's HTML. I think when I started doing development, HTML, we were using links. It was on a VAX machine. It's a mainframe machine, and it was a green screen, and there's no images or text. It's all text, right? Hypertext markup language. That's what it meant. It's all hypertext. It's all text. And then, of course, cross-platform. So WebXR is cross-platform. That means I make an app that runs on this device. I can make it run it on these VR devices or the HoloLens and all the other WebXR compatible devices if they support that standard. So, of course, learning about WebXR, there's also another open standard that's out there. It's called OpenXR. What's the difference between WebXR and OpenXR? WebXR display or input abstraction. At the end of the day, what these open platforms are giving us is an abstraction to the sensors and the display unit to be able to work on a VR device. That means displaying on these two screens, right? There's two screens over here. It would display that properly. And of course, it's on a AR device, it's however it would fit. And then you have your input abstraction. So if your hand detection or these controllers or sound and all that's the abstraction it's providing us. And then there's the difference between WebXR and OpenXR. In WebXR, you publish it on the web. On OpenXR, you have to install it as an app. So a lot of video games on Quest, they are installed, right? You have the App Store, the Quest Store that you have to download, and it would run it there. And the difference between the two is the WebXR is OS dependent, independent. That means you write it once, technically, you write it once, and then you would work everywhere it's compatible. OpenXR is the other way around. You build an app per OS. You have to build it. So if you're using Unity and you're creating XR app and it's your XR or mixed reality application, it uses OpenXR. You have to build it if you want to run it on an Android device, if you want to run it on an iOS device, if you want to run it on these Samsung not Samsung, but the Meta Quest, then you have to compile a version that runs on that. Okay? Okay, going back to the Rubik's Cube, the world record is where this person, Yushin Yu, from China in 2018, he was able to solve the Rubik's Cube in 3.475 seconds. I think it's broken just recently. Of course, my slides just a little bit off. And I got all this information from ChatGPT, so most likely it's outdated 2 years. So yes, most likely it was broken just recently. So I'll have to change my slides. Okay, JavaScript libraries that are available out there that if you want to get started. I will be talking about Model Viewer today, then A-Frame, a little bit about MindAR, Babylon.js, 3JS. Has anyone played with 3JS or have graphics? We have 2 people here. I also, not necessarily WebXR related, there's MediaPipe, there is Wonderland Engine, Play Canvas. I'm going to be talking about Play Canvas, and a little bit of SnapLens Studio. They're all related to JavaScript, but not necessarily WebXR on those. Okay, so Model Viewer. Model Viewer, if you go to modelviewer.dev, it is a custom HTML element displaying 3D models, viewing it in AR. So let's see how that goes. So at the end of the day, there's 2 scripts that you need to incorporate into your application. And then there's a tag called Model Viewer. You specify the model that you're trying to show. And then notice how there's a background color, there's camera controls, auto rotate. And then that's it. Once you have that, it would look something like this. And let me show you how that works. If we go to, can you see my screen? Modelviewer.dev. So modelviewer.dev, it's really easy to get started. Because there's examples here. Let's see, /editor. Okay. So what you do, you upload, or you can select one of the items here, and then you can actually download or deploy it as a mobile app. Here's what I'm going to do. I have this sample that I have. See if I can get my mobile app to show. Okay. You can see my screen right here? Okay, so Model Viewer. See that? That is on my phone. And I can click View in Space. Notice how you can see the background, people in, and I can see if it'll detect. Moving around. Notice how I have my Rubik's Cube. I can rotate it, and it stays there. Of course, this is it does not understand this while it's blocking, but it's located in the same space. In few lines of code, you will be able to do that. Isn't that cool? Right? And that is pretty much the easiest way to incorporate. So if you have a 3D model, you want to incorporate this to your application, it's just easy to do. Okay, let's go back to the presentation. Any questions so far? Yes? Yes. I do not know if there is that is incorporated in this library. So you typically just do that. Yeah, there's. Mhm. That's great. I understand. Um, I've noticed, because a lot of the common one is using Chrome. I've used a lot of the Chrome site, or Chromium. That one is the most, what you call the open standard, where they implement all the different standards for it. That's the most feature complete. So some of the browsers, like Mozilla, may not have completed all that one. So it depends on what the libraries are trying to use. But it's all about abstraction on top of it. But in terms of experience, it's about the same. You have the button, you can display the button, but the button might look different. Yes, I understand. Yeah, that can happen. Yeah, yeah, that can happen. Now that you mentioned that, you may have different experience, especially on the when you're using it in Oculus, right? Or I could still call it Oculus, you call it Meta Quest. You use it in VR versus you're using it in AR. They might look different in terms of space, right? Um, yes, so most likely there's possibly any web development, every browser may have different implementation, but they, as much as possible, that's the reason why you have open standard to make it closely with each other. Yes. Yes, actually, there is a kind of use for WebXR for this. So we can pull it up later, and we can see all the different, whichever implements which. Okay, this is the most expensive Rubik's Cube. Cost about $2.5 million. It was to celebrate the 15th anniversary of the Rubik's Cube. So there's Ruby, there's different, gems. It's playable. That's the important part of it. It had to be playable. Yeah. So yeah, this is back in 1995. Okay, A-Frame.io is another web framework for building 3D, AR, VR experiences with a combination of HTML and JavaScript. So it looks something like this, where you specify, you add your script, A-Frame.min.js, and notice how there's tags, and then you specify. In this case, we have a box, a sphere, and a cylinder. And notice how there's color. Does that look familiar to you? The CSS color scheme. Yeah, so that's something you can do. And positioning, you have to position it in 3D space. So think about it. You're a director. You have to specify the background color. In this case, the sky color is this one. And then you have a sphere, you have a cylinder, you have a box, and they're located and rotated in specific form. The unit of measure here is in meters. And so that means negative is in front of where the user is, and you specify where X, Y, and Z coordinate. And then that's the simplest one that I've seen so far, and it would look something like this, and it would work in 3D. So let me showcase that here. So if you go to aframe.io, there's a lot of examples here. So it would look like this, and they will have a VR button. So if you are in Oculus Quest, you go to this website using their browser, there's a VR button that would take over the whole thing outside of the of the browser. I don't know if it shows here. And then if I do Control Shift I, oh, there's a visual inspector, and the visual inspector would help you navigate, create the scene itself. So think about it. If you're creating these VR scenes, you have to locate where they are in space, right? So now you can change the size, you can look at the view, and you can edit where it needs to be, some of the 3D assets it needs to be there. And they also can do hand tracking. So there's hand tracking capabilities here. There's 360 image. So if you have a 360 camera, if you want to add those images into your website and be able to do some experience like this, it will also work with video. If you have a 360 video camera, or maybe you can take it from your phone and then you can play it. See if it will showcase. So you can have those experiences as part of your site. And you can just easily share it with anyone when it's needed. There's also Beat Saber, or if you have played VR games, I like Beat Saber, but here they have a kind of like a Moon Rider, kind of like the same experience when you're trying to what you call these, play this game where it comes to you and you slash, or however you've seen those kind of games, right? Yeah, so those things. So it has that capability and able to use the controller, do hand tracking in VR, and also it works with AR. Let's see if I can show you what that sample is there. Okay. You see my screen? Okay, so A-frame. Notice how there's the background, right? So I can have a 360 video. I have my Rubik's Cube there. I can click the AR button, see if it will work. Of course, sometimes live demos does not work. Let's see. Okay, maybe not this time. Maybe I'm using the wrong browser. Sometimes it's the Chrome beta that has that capability. Okay, so notice how it's about the same. Now I can move the Rubik's Cube in the room. So this one is using A-frame. So it's a combination of JavaScript that you can use actually with that. Yes, actually it's using WebGL on top of 3JS and using 3JS to be able to display these. So it's an abstraction on top of abstraction. It's abstraction, that's what happened here, to make it easier for us to be able to do some development, right? It does, if you are a game developer, or if you're familiar with Unity, A-frame uses like the same entity component system, where you have an entity, that's the general purpose object, where you can position and transform in the scene, and then components add behaviors. So to make it reusable. So for example, a box, you can specify the position, geometry, but the component is the material. So you can add these components to specify the material, shadowing, all those things. And then of course the system is the global scope of management. So it's a little bit more capable of creating other, it adds extensibility to what it can do. Okay, let's go back to Rubik's Cube. Sometimes this one, I don't know how crazy he is, but he did jump out of a plane and solve the Rubik's Cube in 30 seconds while falling to the ground. It's amazing how some people live their life. Mind AR. Mind AR is an augmented reality library where it can support image tracking and face tracking. And it looks something like this, where you have your scripts. It actually uses A-frame to be able to have be able to showcase some of the 3D models or the capabilities. But you have on the scene, you specify the target, or what I mean here is be able to find a specific marker, and then based from that marker, be able to showcase an AR experience on top of that. So you have an asset, and then you specify the position, and then you're looking for this model. It will load the model on top of the image target. And that's on the JavaScript, on the HTML side, that's pretty much the simplest example that I can show you. And it looks something like this. Mind AR. So notice how it's going to look for a marker. It's trying to scan a marker. And then I have my marker here, and I will scan. And once it finds it, notice how it gives it on top of that marker. So once it finds it again, and it is located there, right? So in a few lines of code, you can have this markerless AR experience. You can use that. This Pictorize Studio is actually using Mind AR. In background, you can use it to where like flashcards, or be able to show a YouTube video in Canvas on top of your business card. You can have business card animated models, just different. But the Pictorize Studio makes it web-based drag and drop editor, and you can publish that. It makes it easier to build these type of experiences. So of course it looks something like that, where you have, let's see if I can play it. Yeah. So notice how it's tracking as it moves around. Isn't that cool? Yes. So different examples, right? Different examples of AR experience to be able to use it in the browser. Different use case than the video games that you play. But these are, at the end of the day, these are kind of like those short experiences where you share this application, you share this link experiences, and then you do something else. Okay, the largest Rubik's Cube. It is playable, and I don't know how long it takes him to finish this, but yes, it is there. He almost got buried there for a second, but that is the largest Rubik's Cube. Okay. Another one that you can do is Babylon.js. Babylon.js is using TypeScript. It is a 3D game engine. It has full WebXR support. It's actually another abstraction on top of 3JS. It's using 3JS also. And it does include gaze, teleportation. It has a lot of AR experimental features, animation, games in the browser. There are different tools in how you would use this, camera movements. It's really made for building games, if you want to build games. It has a physical simulation, collision detection. It has support in HoloLens, Android phones, and Quest. It is actually sponsored by Microsoft. Babylon.js is open source that is available out there. So it has this playground where you can create some of the scenes, and then you can play it before you incorporate into your application. So in this case, there's a scene, there's always a scene, and then there's always a camera camera lights action. You have to specify where the lighting is, where's the object that you're going to display. In this case, I'm going to just change the background scene. And then this one specifies that it is an XR experience. So it adds the button and all that. It would look something like this, right? Where in VR, it generates those two images, and you can pan around, move around, and do that. There's also a utility on the browser. There's a WebXR, what you call these. Let's see if I can show you what I'm doing here. So for example, this WebXR, there's an extension called WebXR. If you go to developer tools, notice how, I think there's this one right there. There's a WebXR experience. So when I see if I can view it in 3D, I don't have to wear my headset in order to do some development. If I just want to look at the view, what would it look like with the headset on? At least I can visualize this before I even deploy. So I don't have to be wearing it all the time and remove it, do some changes, and et cetera, et cetera. Okay, going back to the presentation. It's called WebXR extension. Another side note, Nike.com actually uses Babylon.js. If you've customized your Nike shoes, has anyone done this before or have bought these custom shoes? It's amazing. Actually, I'm tempted to buy one, but not that one. Let's see if we can play with it. That was the one we choose. But you can actually customize your shoe now. You can change. It's amazing how much things you can change on this. See? And that's a special order that you can do. But that's using Babylon.js to visualize what you are buying. It's a $200 shoe. But it's you, right? It is customized for you. Yeah, I see more and more like that we're going to have these things, be able to customize to fit our needs and using AR and VR to visualize it before we even buy it. 3JS is another open source cross-browser JavaScript library. A lot of the ones that I've talked to you about are actually based on top of 3JS. It has large community and lots of examples out there. It's specifically made for computer graphics, especially in the web browser. There's a lot of examples there. There's an example here that I wanted to showcase. That's an intro to it. But if you want to learn more, there is if you go to developers.google.com, there's a WebXR step-by-step instructions on how you would do this. But let me see if I can pull up an example of what that looks like. So this model.html. So you still have, you all can see that, or is it too small? Is that better? Now there's more JavaScript. A while ago, it's more HTML and all that, but this has more JavaScript. So on this one, you have an AR button that you're importing, and then there's two main things, initialize and animate. Remember, there's the camera, scene, and then the loader. Loader is the one that would get these. GLTF is 3D model format that is specifically made for the web. Like in this case, the space.gltf. Yeah. A lot of the 3D modeling tool can export to gltf, or sometimes there's converter. So if you have what is the open source Blender? Yes, Blender. Blender can actually export to gltf. So that is free. You can install it in anything. But what this one would look like. Hey, let's see. 3JS. You see my screen? So notice how you just have that page. If I click Start AR, and if I move back a little because where I didn't locate the box, it was just right in front of the camera, 0, 0, 0. I just wanted to show you what 0, 0, 0 means in this space. Is actually right in front of the camera, and then if you move back, then it is actually located 0, 0, 0 where the camera got started. Of course, there's no controls here. It just stays where it's at. Right? That's the whole idea. There's this AR. There are a few lines of code. This one is about 100 lines of code. The goal is to have a scene, you specify where the camera is, you have a renderer, and then you have to identify, and you add the button. At the end of the day, there's a button that says AR scene. Come on here. Anyway, you have to, of course, camera, lights, action, right? There's camera, and then you specify the light, because it will be, without the light, then it won't render right. And then you have the loader, the model, specify the model. Oh, there's the create button. That's the button that shows and uses the camera. Any questions so far? Interesting? Yes? Yes. Yeah, D3 is specifically made for coding. Okay, the world record of the mostly complex Rubik's Cube is a 33 by 33 by 33 Rubik's Cube. And this little trivia, that hash pattern, actually, that determines that is playable, that the Rubik's Cube is playable if they're able to do that hash pattern. Of course, they're because of how close they are to each other. So that's why it looks like that. Okay. Media pipe. This one is not WebXR related, but I wanted to showcase because it's also open source framework. It's cross-platform, multi-device. If you want the face mesh, face detection, hand detection, Objectron post detection, there's a lot of example. It works with Node or it works with your browser. And in this case, it would do something like this, where it has a filter in front of the face and that kind of stuff. So it allows you to be able to experiment on these. Play Canvas is another open source HTML5 game engine. It's actually built on top of WebGL, and you can use it for visualizations, VR and AR. Play Canvas would look something like this. Let me see if I can replace that. So on the browser, you can actually be building these experiences however you wanted to display these assets. And then if I want some interaction, like in this case, I want, whenever I click that button in AR, I want to add a script. And that script, I specify, like in this case, the rotation. So when it's saying here that when I click the button, it would fire an event, and then that event would would rotate it. So the events are actually passed in, the event name. So as a parameter into these this component, you specify that event name, and then it would do the action. So let me showcase what I'm talking about there. Hey. So play canvas will work. Oh, of course. For some reason, I broke it in the code, but I have it open there, so you can actually try it out. Once you sign up for this play canvas, you can test it on the browser. So in this case, there's the VR and AR mode. You see that? So let's do the AR mode. So notice how if I click this button, then it would start rotating. Click the other one, it would fire the event. Once the event is fired, it sends the message to the Rubik's Cube or the 3D asset. So in just a few lines of code, there's interaction there. Any questions so far? I know I'm doing a little bit of fast, and a lot of it, I'm showing you different code and different options. But of course, what I want you to take from here is like the different options, right? Whichever you want to study, you can go deep dive into these technologies. Depends on, choose your battle, how much JavaScript you really want to delve with. I also want to showcase SnapLens Studio. It is a scripting engine for rich interactive experience. Anyone have used Snapchat here or Snapchat users? Wow. Okay. If you are using Snapchat, in order to create those, has anyone seen those filters where you can actually have those wacky filters in Snapchat? You can actually use that as a camera also into your application. There is a snap. Let's see if I have it here. Snap. Oh, maybe not. But anyway, this Lens Studio looks something like this. It's free to get started, to download. So it's kind of like, in a way, a game engine. But you can specify behavior. It's a little bit small, but I can't make it larger because, it won't work. But you can have the script. So this JavaScript item that I have here. So in this case, there's the component. There's two input for this JavaScript code. There's the scene object, and then there's the name of the tween, meaning it's the animation that you need to call. This one, it's listening to an event. Specify here that if my mouth is open event, then it would bind that, and then you can start an animation because of that, right? With specified target object and tween name. So in this case, this is my behavior. I added the script. I specify the object that I want to work at, and then what is the command in this case, it will be rotation. So what that would look like, it would look something like this. So I can have, notice how it stopped. I opened my mouth and it started rotating. Close my mouth, it stops. Open and it rotates. Notice how it binds to my face. And then I can publish this to Snapchat. But there's JavaScript involved in order to do some programming on this application. Okay. Just a little bit fun there. So there's helper script. You can do behavior, tune, manager. There's a world object controller. There's API references. There's a lot of help. Of course, I wanted to show you also, if you want to get started with this one, the easiest way is on Lens Studio. There's a lot of examples that is out there that you can start with if you just want to play with this. So a lot of the examples on how you would do some animations, not necessarily scripting. Sometimes you just need to change and tweak it a little bit, but there's a lot of examples for beginner, intermediate, and advanced to create those filters, those AR filters. Okay, I will be teaching this August 15th here at Improving at 6 p.m. If you want to learn more about Lens Studio, I have not necessarily a workshop. I would be talking more about how to get started with Lens Studio, how to build an app or a lens filter, and it's going to be here at this August 15th to talk about that. If you're interested, feel free to connect and join us. And it's using JavaScript in Snap AR Lens Studio. All right. Of course, there's a lot of examples out there. If you want to try it out, I did talk about this. Moonwriter is a good example on how application or game using WebXR. Okay. Of course, robots. This robot is able to solve a Rubik's Cube in less than 1 second. Of course, robots are going to take over our jobs. Hopefully not, but of course you can solve it under 1 second. Of course, this is using computer vision and a lot of it's interesting. Okay. All right, this is the GitHub link. If you want to get access to not just the presentation, but also the code that I did showcase today. In summary, what is mixed reality? It's a blend of physical and digital world, and it is WebXR is mixed reality for web browsers and how you would use it on a browser. I did talk about different types of virtual reality experiences, the non-immersive, semi-immersive, fully immersive, and social VR. I also talked about augmented reality experiences, marker-based, markerless. We were able to kind of showcase what's the difference between marker-based and markerless AR. A little bit about, I did talk about location-based AR, projection-based AR, and superimpose based AR. So we did talk about the open source JavaScript libraries that is available for you to try if you want to get started on this. The easiest one I'd say is the model viewer, and then A-Frame is extensible. Mind AR is another easy one to get started with if you just want to be able to have a marker-based AR. And then Babylon.js is another framework for you. And then, of course, 3JS. And then also I talked about Snapchat and then also some other things. Okay. About me, my name is Ron Dagdag. The best way to contact me is at Ron Dagdag. It's not Twitter now. It is X, right? That's something new this week. And the best way to contact me is through LinkedIn. And thank you very much for geeking out with me about mixed reality, WebXR, and Rubik's Cube. Thank you. Did you learn anything today that you didn't know about? Yes. Yes. Great. That my job is here. My job is done here. Thank you. Appreciate it. Any questions? Mm-hmm. There's- yeah, ADA guidelines. A lot of it is in our world. It's a little bit of experimental at this point, right? And sometimes it's how you would design these, but I didn't see any and know any guidelines for ADA or trends around that. But if you think about these tools and how it's being used, a lot of it is how you would design because it requires a lot of the image processing on the phone. And not just that, but also in VR, there's accessibilities involved there too. Yeah, I mean, it's evolving. It's, yes, actually, A-Frame does support some of the. Actually, when I was showing it a while ago, there's part of it that actually has some shadowing, where you can identify. Let's see if I can show you what I'm talking about here. Depending on the background, see, notice how this lighting condition, it's lighter on this side and then darker on this side, but the model itself has some different shadow and lighting estimation. It has that capability. Even on the AR side, this is the one that would work. I think I was able to make it work on the other one. But you get what I'm saying, right? It also has that on the AR side, where it would have some estimation of shadow and lighting estimation. It may not be perfect because that doesn't, you know, it doesn't reflect that. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Yes. Yeah, that is. Well, of course, 3JS is something that's become a standard in a lot of the 3D model experience. So if you have experience with 3JS, that's a good place to start and incorporate WebXR technologies on top of that because it is already included there. If you're starting and you wanted to learn more about this A-frame, is a good way to get started. There's a lot of examples out there, a lot of experimentation that other people have done. It's the most mature one that I've noticed that is being used. Babylon JS, I recommend that if especially if you're doing a lot of the correct shading, a lot of the 3D modeling, and making sure that because it is a video game engine. So I recommend that if you need something really crisp and really able to that works well on the browser and optimized through the current browser, Babylon JS has a lot that capability. So it just depends on the project you're starting with. Model viewer, right? That's the easiest one. In a few lines of code, if you just want to incorporate 3D asset into your website, just use that. And actually, if you search for astronaut on Google, it's being used every day. So astronaut, let's see if it'll showcase it. Sometimes it would, sometimes it wouldn't. There's a way you can showcase 3D on this one. Maybe not. But sometimes it will show I think it was dinosaur. Dinosaur. See, notice how there's a 3D button. See that? And you can actually click on the 3D button, and it just runs, right? If this is using model viewer, and then you view it in space, and you can, let's see, it'll show. Maybe it's actual size, but there's a dinosaur. Okay, right? Anyway, there's dinosaur in the room, but that's just looking around. But I think there's a view actual size, and there you go. That's what it's gonna look like in front of the room. There is a dinosaur here, right? It also comes with sound. Isn't that cool? Yes. So notice how it's incorporated in our everyday life. And these technologies are already here. It's just a matter for us to start using it. Yes. Anyone else? I've noticed that these jobs are like niche, right? But if you think about it, if you're a web developer and if you find a way to start incorporating it into your application, and if there is a business need, you have the tool, right? So it really depends on the project you're working on. And there, I've noticed that there's some use cases where they want to showcase a 360 image into their offices, or some of those. Then you can just incorporate that as part of your site, right? So that's what's good about WebXR. You don't have to be a game developer in order to incorporate this AR experience into your application, or XR experience into your application. So it becomes just part of the bigger picture of what you're trying to do as a web developer. Yeah, there's no problem. There's XR engineer, but a lot of it is more, oh, you need to be a gamer, but not necessarily just the WebXR. Cool. Any other questions? Yes. Yeah, so Meta, they're evolving their platform, right? And notice how these devices have found their use cases. So it's kind of like when it first got released, it's like all these different applications, and then suddenly we're realizing, oh yeah, you use a mobile app for things that are mobile, and use a web browser or desktop app for some things. And in this case, a lot of the examples for mobile, for the VR devices is either gaming or some training, right? A lot of it is related to that. And so, the use cases are getting focused on what it can do. We know the HoloLens devices, the use cases is not necessarily consumer because of how expensive these devices, but it's more of either medical field or somewhere in the construction area where it has its own use cases. WebXR, on the other hand, it's more geared towards us consumers because of how easy it is to be able to have these experiences, right? We have a browser, we have a mobile app now that is already capable of all these, right? The Vision OS, that is exciting. That's going to come up. And there's a lot of sensoring technologies that is incorporated into that. Anyone has seen that or seen some videos of that Vision OS? And WebXR is going to be part of that. There's experimental part of the iOS, or what is the browser? Safari. Yeah, so Safari is getting WebXR capabilities. And so it's evolving. Now we know what use cases we can incorporate these things into, and it's just amazing time to learn more about it. Yes. Anything else? Interesting? Yes? All right. Glad to hear that. Thank you. Yeah.